Central, the place to talk about movies, TV shows based on movies, toys based on movies, games based on movies, and rides based on movies. I'm your host, Mr. CCS, and these are my pets, George the Gorilla, Cahal the Dolphin, and Frank the Sea Turtle. Remember what I said about shark movies back in April when I reviewed Deep Blue Sea? Hashtag shameless plug. Yeah, I forced myself to watch 2 shark movies back to back in a single sitting. Yeah, hold your applause because this review is another double whammy. It seems as though I've done a double whammy every season since the second one, and I guess I may continue this tradition now by talking about 2 recent blockbuster movies from Warner Brothers.
So, who remembers Deep Blue Sea? Surprisingly, a lot of people have fond memories of it. I can't blame them. It's a ton of fun, and it's definitely a quality movie compared to other shark movies, like Sharknado for instance. I still cannot believe that those movies made up a freaking franchise, but that's beyond the point. Strangely enough, there was a novel released right before Deep Blue Sea was in production, and that novel was simply titled Meg, a novel of deep sea terror. The novel followed a marine biologist by the name of Jonas Taylor, who is stationed at the Mariana Trench, where he is up against the Megalodon, which is a prehistoric shark long thought extinct. The book was enough of a success to spawn a series of sequels which still continue to be published to this very day. It was also successful enough to grab the attention of several movie studios. Disney's Hollywood Pictures, the division in charge of several of Disney's live-action productions at the time that is now defunct, bought the rights back in 1996, a year before the book was even published, with Tom Wheeler set to write the screenplay. He was fired due to studios not liking his script, and in his place was Jeffrey Boehm, who was also fired for the same reason. The production stalled in 1999, and the rights reverted back to the original author, Steve Alten. By the mid-2000s, New Line Cinema had their hands on the project, and had Jan de Bont set to direct with Guillermo del Toro as producer. However, due to budgetary constraints, the project was dropped again. By 2015, Warner Brothers officially picked up the project with a new script, as well as director Eli Roth, who was eventually replaced with John Turteltaub, and actor Jason Statham was cast as Jonas Taylor. The film began production in late 2016, with principal photography being completed in January of 2017, with the movie releasing in the summer of 2018. Despite mixed critical reviews, the movie grossed over $500 million, which meant a sequel was immediately considered. Steve Alten was happy the direction Warner Brothers was taking the films, so I guess that meant they could go ahead with a sequel, with Ben Wheatley directing this time around. The film eventually made its way into theaters just last summer by the time this review comes out, and despite doing pretty decently at the box office, the film was not well received by critics, even being nominated for a Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Director. Oh god, we're in for a treat today. Despite the negative response to the second film, there are apparently still plans to make future installments based on the other books. However, first and foremost, how well do these B-movie blockbusters fare?
It's time to find out. These are the 2 films of the Meg franchise. The Meg and Meg 2, The Trench.
Previously thought to be extinct, a massive creature attacks the deep-sea submersible, leaving it disabled and trapping the crew at the bottom of the Pacific. With time running out, a visionary oceanographer recruits rescue diver Jonas Taylor, played by Jason Statham, to rescue the crew and the sea from an unimaginable threat, a 75-foot-long prehistoric shark known as the Megalodon. Alright, let's talk about the second film. Jonas Taylor leads a research team on an exploratory drive into the deepest depths of the ocean. Their voyage spirals into chaos when a malevolent mining operation threatens their mission and forces them into a high-stakes battle for survival. Pitted against colossal prehistoric sharks and relentless environmental plunderers, they must outrun, outsmart, and outswim, yes, I just said that, their merciless predators.
Okay, I have a lot of thoughts on both of these films. So in regards to the first film, I surprisingly liked it. Yeah, I like the first one. It's nowhere near as good as Jaws or even Deep Blue Sea, but it is still a very fun time. I liked it. It's good. Those are my thoughts. I was pleasantly surprised. With my thoughts on the first film in mind, I actually had some high hopes for the second one. Unfortunately, I got something not as creative nor as well done as the first one. The second film commits one of the worst crimes a movie can do, being straight up boring. Seriously, the end of the first act and the beginning of the second act really bored me to tears. At the same time, I found the second film's tone and overall narrative not being as fun or as simple as the first film. The first film felt more like a monster movie, while the second one felt more like a generic action movie with monsters in it. Way too many monsters, but I'll get there in a minute. With my thoughts made clear, let's dive into both of them and talk about what worked and what didn't.
In both films, I can confidently say that two characters are very well done, and those characters are Jonas Taylor and his stepdaughter/adopted daughter, Mei Ying, who was played by Sophia Kai. I've never really had a lot of things to say about Jason Statham as an actor. I've seen him in a ton of things recently, being the Fast Saga films, which are movies I plan to cover in the future, as well as The Beekeeper, which was a pretty good action film from earlier in the year, and Snatch, which is a heist movie by Guy Ritchie that I really liked. In each of those films, he plays very similar but also very different characters, whether it be Deckard Shaw, who went from revenge-driven brother to foil to Luke Hobbs, Clay, who was a revenge-driven assassin going after scammers, or Turkish, who's just not a very good guy. In these films, Statham plays Jonas Taylor, very straight. The character is humble and feels like a human being that was in danger, unlike Tom Cruise in the garbage heap of mess, whatever that is, the 2017 Mummy film, as well as having a dry sense of humor and a protective aspect to him, especially to his new family. I also really like his arc in the first film, which is about redemption. At the beginning of the movie, he loses members of his team, and he distances himself from his previous job due to regret and his superiors not believing him, only to be forced back when he learns to trust again, and eventually finds a new family. Overall, I can't imagine anyone else playing this character now because Jason Statham is the first actor I picture whenever I think of Jonas. As far as Mei Ying goes, in the first film, despite the fact that she's an 8-year-old kid, her dry sense of humor and her personality always made me laugh. In the second film, she was reflective of both her parents, having her mother's sense of humanity, and her adopted father's sense of heroism, and I kind of like that about her. I think Sophia Kai did a great job in both movies, and I look forward to seeing her future career. Moving on to two other characters that appeared in both films, we have DJ, played by Paige Kennedy, and Mac, played by Cliff Curtis. In the first film, DJ was a comic relief who only made me laugh sometimes, and in the second film, he was a comic relief that only made me laugh sometimes. Yeah, he's kinda not great, but there are moments of his I genuinely appreciated. In the first film, I love the racism joke as well as the life jacket joke. And in the second film, I love the fact that he grew a pair and learned how to fight, which doesn't do him many favors. Overall, there are some shining moments in his character, but there are also a lot of drawbacks, which keeps him from feeling fresh and unique. As far as Mac goes, I think I like him more in the second film. In the first film, he's a person Jonas trusts, but I feel like we needed to see a little more of their relationship fleshed out. I don't know, but maybe there could have been more to the cold open, like seeing him and Mac talk over comms before the fateful mission. In the second film, we can see that these two really do see each other as brothers, and that was really nice to see. I also think that a lot of his jokes were funnier in the second film as well, just putting that out there. Overall, it was good to see him in both, and if they do continue the films, I'd love to see more of them. Now, let's talk about the characters of the first film. I think the first film, on the whole, has the better characters. Jax, played by Ruby Rose, as the tech-savvy genius who's very cynical, put a smile on my face several times. The Wall, played by Olafur Olafsson, being a tech genius who's a goofball, but also takes the situation seriously, works for me. Laurie, played by Jessica McNamee, who is an expert at what she does, but also cares deeply for her comrades. Even Jonas, who used to be married to her, was great to see. Dr. Heller, played by Robert Taylor, being a skeptic but a caring man at the same time, gave him depth, even if he was a complete douche at times. And finally, Dr. Zhang, played by Winston Chow, who only cares for his comrades before his work, being a very deep character, worked for me, and I even cared when he died. However, the two best characters of the bunch have to be Sui Yin and Morris, played by Lee Bingbing and Rainn Wilson, respectively. Su-yin started off a little stale, but then she became far more interesting and even hilarious. Seriously, that scene where she sees Jonas's abs was hilarious, despite the fact that it was super fan-servicey. I don't know what I'm saying. The whole joke about them getting together as a couple always had me laughing too. As far as Morris goes, I genuinely thought they were building him up to be the stereotypical dude in the suit whose job is to be the crappy, cheap villain that the filmmakers desperately want you to hate. Films like Avatar, the remake of The Blob, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and even Barbie do this. But to my surprise, he wasn't. No, he was actually a very charismatic and even sometimes human character. Oh wow! There's the occasional moment where he's kinda that stereotypical character, but before he has the chance to be hated on, he's taken out of the movie, and that was a huge relief and made me like him even more. The only villains of the first film are the Megs themselves. This is why I am baffled that there are not one, not two, but 3 human villains in the second film. There's Jess, who works on the ship and is cartoonishly evil for no reason. The evil rich lady, whose name I can't remember, who is just like Gunnar Eversole from Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, even dying in a similar fashion. And the mercenary, who they are trying to make intimidating but is way too goofy for his own good. Yeah, the second film has a ton of crappy characters. They didn't bring Su-yin back because Bing Bing had creative differences with the studio. I mean, just look at the tone and the script of this movie. And replacing her as her brother, who we never knew about. Honestly, Jiu Ming is a character I don't really care about. He's way too generic for his own good, and I honestly had wished they'd just brought Su-yin back. Add to that, the other characters are just obnoxious. Rigas just whines over and over and over to the point I had hoped she was eaten. I also completely forgot about Sal. She did nothing that impressed me. Alright, let's talk about the Megs themselves. In the first film, I was genuinely surprised that we had 2 Megs. There was a smaller one, which gives our characters hell for most of the movie before being killed around the halfway point, which allows the bigger one to take the center stage. Both of these things serve their purpose extremely well, and I ultimately have no complaints with how they were utilized. In the second film, we have 3 Megs, and all of them are pretty interchangeable. By the climax, I completely forgot that there were 3 of them in the first place, and that's for 2 reasons. 1, they barely do anything that stands out to me, and 2, there are way too many other monsters in this movie to begin with. I don't get why they didn't keep the Megs as the main villains, because we have all these other side villains that the characters have to deal with, to the point where I consider this a ripoff of Jurassic Park. Overall, the first film uses titular monsters well, while the second one didn't. That's all I had to say about the characters and monsters in both movies. The first film made use of what it had, while the second one tries and fails to do the same to less than stellar results. Moving on to the effects, I have to say that both films are kind of mixed VFX, is what we're getting. For the most part, the effects in the first film were passable. The sharks look kind of off, but the underwater sequences look pretty good. And I expected them to be improved upon in the second film, but the quality of the effects from the first film still persists in this one, and I was extremely disappointed because, well, I just saw more mediocre VFX. I gave it a pass in the first film because it was the first time doing something like this, but I can't for the second. As far as the music goes, both movies are composed by Harry Gregson Williams, who I think did a great job with what he was given. They're both fun and action-packed soundtracks that fit the tones of their respective movies extremely well. Enough said. Now, let's talk about the tone and the action sequences. The first film has the tone of a monster movie, with some fun stuff, some scary stuff, and a mixture of both. And I think it worked pretty well. In the second movie, it takes a more generic action movie approach, which bothered me, because the first film's tone works so well, which means I think that the second film has poor use of its tone. In regards to action, the first film has a ton of great scenes, including that opening sequence, which sets the scare factor up really well, the cage sequence, which was full of tension, and the finale, which sees the Meg going after civilians, as well as Jonas and Su-yin stopping the Meg in a very creative way. The second film's action, as mentioned above, is far more generic, and feels like it's out of any other Jason Statham film. Either that, or it's straight up boring. Like that whole scene underwater. There was no need for that to go on as long as it did. Hell, even the finale was a copy and paste from the first film, just with more monsters. That's a shame, because the first film did a great job with its finale, while this one feels like a cheap imitation. Okay, I think I've talked enough about these films. It's such a mixed bag, this franchise, truly. I don't know why I spoke like Yoda. While I really like the first film for doing the most with what it has, even if it has some not great moments, the second film bored me so freaking much and really forces me to point out how little it seems to care. Overall, my score for both of these movies reflect my overall mood towards both of them right now, and they may change in the near future. But for now, the first film gets an 8 out of 10, and the second film gets a 4, with the average score of both movies being about a 6 out of 10. Again, this could change in the future, but this is what I think right now. Okay, I think we got it.
Okay, this was such a nightmare to write because I had a lot of thoughts on both of these movies, and I didn't want to make a separate video for both of them because it wasn't worth it to me. Anyways, feel free to leave your thoughts on both of these movies in the comments section, and tune in next week when I take a look at the long-awaited sequel to the 2014 Godzilla film. With that said, my name is Mr. CCS, these are my pets, this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap. See you next week.